The Bogosity Podcast, early and ad-free. Become a subscriber at Patreon, Subscribestar, or Discord. Use the links at donate.bogosity.tv.
Welcome to the Bogosity Podcast for the week of June 28, 2026. The podcast that'll sing those words forever. This is your host, Shane Killian. Let's Romanize the news of the bogus. Tulsi Gabbard has stepped away from her position as Director of National Intelligence to care for her husband, Abraham, who is suffering from a rare form of bone cancer. On her next-to-last day in office, she released the Fauci files, declassified documents showing that Fauci knowingly lied to Congress and helped gain-of-function research at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. In a press release, her office said, quote, Gabbard is releasing never-before-seen communications and documents exposing how Fauci worked with politicized career leadership in the intelligence community to suppress the truth about his actions, the virus's lab leak origins, and his role in directing U.S. funding for this dangerous research that caused immeasurable harm and countless lost lives. These documents expose Fauci's direct role in influencing and manipulating IC assessments on COVID-19, and how Fauci lied to Congress in 2024 when, under oath, he denied knowledge of or participation in discussions with intelligence officials about viral research. They provided full links to the documents. Gabbard said, quote, the COVID-19 pandemic caused tremendous hardship and pain for millions of our fellow Americans and for countless people all over the world. After years of lies, censorship, and cover-ups, the American people deserve transparency, truth, and accountability. The tactics used to hide the truth are straight from the deep state playbook. Politicized, self-serving leaders like Dr. Fauci covered up their own wrongdoing and abuses of power, manipulated intelligence, lied to Congress, and undermined a duly elected president by restricting his access to vital facts needed to keep the country safe. It's time the American people learn the real story. The files contain emails, memos, meeting agendas, intelligence discussions, and other discussions mostly from 2020 to 2021. The documents show that, pre-pandemic, the NIAID funded millions of dollars into bad coronavirus research at WIV. Some, including Dr. Rand Paul, have suggested that this could be the real origin of COVID, a lab leak from the Institute instead of a zoonotic transfer. The documents show that Fauci deliberately steered everyone away from lab leak evidence and hid assessments from institutes such as Lawrence Livermore suggesting a lab origin, especially noting evidence such as the fur and cleavage site. Although the documents don't confirm a lab leak, they do confirm that Fauci lied to Congress under oath in 2024 when he denied knowledge of or participation in discussions with the intelligence community on viral gain-of-function research. Although there's no smoking gun about the origins, there is evidence that the lab leak theory was improperly dismissed far too early without the necessary investigation that the available evidence should have sparked. But we now know that the U.S. funded risky coronavirus research at WIV. Under Fauci, the NIAID provided grants via EcoHealth Alliance that supported bat coronavirus collection, sequencing, and functional studies at WIV. That's not new information, but it was previously dismissed as a conspiracy theory. Now we have confirmation of it. We know that Fauci was involved in early origins discussions, including a February 3, 2020 expert meeting on the evolutionary origins of 2019 NCOV, as it was then called. There are records of communications or briefings involving Fauci, NIH officials, and IC members in 2021 around the Biden-ordered 90-day origins review. We know the IC took the lab leak theory seriously. Emails and notes reflect discussions about the fur and cleavage site, WIV gain-of-function research, and early illnesses among researchers. Some assessments, including from Lawrence Livermore, noted the plausibility of lab origins. We see the disconnect from the internal debate on the lab leak, which had moderate confidence in agencies like the FBI and DOE, and how Fauci and others presented it as a crazy conspiracy theory to Congress and the public. It does show the need for heightened security and oversight of viral research. If nothing else, the U.S. funding viral research in China and then lying about it should be a major scandal. Personally, I think Gabbard might have overstated things, but that's what happens when something is as politicized as this. But on the other hand, she would know what's in the redacted portions we didn't get to see. Multiple independent lines of evidence create reasons to suspect something bad happened at WIV, as well as the circumstantial evidence of location, workers falling ill, previous biosafety concerns, and deletion of a key sequence database in 2019. That's more than enough to justify a serious investigation. Add to that the genetic features, including the furin cleavage site, and the absence of a confirmed intermediate animal host or reservoir, and you have probable cause to specifically suspect the WIV. U.S. intelligence considers this plausible, with the FBI assessing it as most likely. The Department of Energy and other departments shifted their suspicion to a lab origin in later years as well. Consider the evidence from a Bayesian standpoint. WIV's risky research, times their history of leaks, times proximity, times illnesses, times biosafety issues, times lack of animal source, times early Chinese cover-up, and you have a likelihood ratio so high, I don't know how low the priors would have to be for the lab leak not to become the probable posterior. But it's not so much as to consider it overwhelming or settled. Zoonotic transfer still remains a viable alternative. The fact is, the lab leak is no longer a fringe conspiracy theory, but the origins of COVID are still uncertain. And the only way we can get that certainty is with a rigorous, transparent, international investigation, if that's even possible, and if the evidence for it hasn't already been lost to time.
Presenting the greatest game this side of Yuggoth. You are H.P. Lovecraft's cat, and your name is Nick. Right, we can't say that on a podcast. Well, anyway, that's the point. Your name is a joke, so now you are out for revenge. You become the Necronomicat. Using the Necronomicon, you come to the present day to buy a cat. That's a gun. For a cat. It's a fat cat. But the Necronomicon is treacherous, and it read in Lovecraft's monsters. Now, in a crumbling world, you must fight. Build your team, buy guns and armor, buy items of dubious legality, defeat the bosses of each level, then take Lovecraft down. Play Necronomicat. The link is at cat.bogosity.tv. Yeah, we're doing cat.bogosity.tv, not that other one. What, you want me to get kicked off the internet or something?
We've talked before in our coverage of the AI cases about New York Times et al. V. OpenAI, also known as the News Plaintiffs case, since the plaintiffs are all major news outlets such as the Daily News, as well as news organizations such as the Center for Investigative Reporting. Their case in the highly corrupt Southern District of New York, see our coverage of many different cases there, including Martha Stewart, Ross Ulbricht, and Universal v. Corley, against OpenAI and Microsoft is based on the usual claims we've covered, especially market delusion in which the AI produces competing works that harm the market for their products. They're trying to slip that into Factor 4 of the fair use analysis. The idea is that ChatGPT is trained on articles from the New York Times. Users use ChatGPT to get their news instead of the Times, and that makes it theft instead of fair use. In fact, they're now trying to amend their complaint to say that their services are tailored to infringement because of the Supreme Court's Cox decision. Well, Gallup just produced a key piece of evidence debunking all of that. The headline for the release of their new poll is, quote, "Use of AI to get news in U.S. is rare." Their points were that, quote, 7% say they rely on AI tools when getting news and information. AI ranks at the bottom of sources from which Americans get most news, and many Americans distrust AI-assisted news reporting outright. Of the 2,062 U.S. adults surveyed, only 2% said they rely on AI a great deal, and only 5% said they used it a fair amount. 12% said some, 23% said only a little, and the remaining 57% don't use AI for news at all. It wasn't much better in their coveted 18 to 49 demographic, where just 10% said a great deal or a fair amount, 13% some, 22% only a little, and 54% not at all. All total, 2% said they get their news from AI, compared to 8% magazines, 13% podcasts, 16% search engines, and 17% radio. Cable news broadcast was higher at 20%, and 28% said network television. That paled to news websites and apps, where 44% of people get their news. But the biggest source by far, 54%, more than half, said they get their news from social media. It's social media that's diluting their market, not AI. In fact, Americans distrust AI even more than they distrust the news, even when the AI is being employed by a trusted news source. And that's at a time when distrust in the news has been falling for years. Gallup said, quote, "These findings offer no clear path for news agencies looking to use AI in their reporting while maintaining public trust. Many Americans emphasize the importance of verification of some kind in AI-driven news content, while others emphasize disclosure. But 4 in 10 say their trust in the news would suffer from any use of AI in reporting, creating a challenge for the news industry as it looks to remain competitive in a rapidly changing landscape, while simultaneously trying to rebuild trust in the institution after a decades-long decline." The question now is, does it pose a challenge for the OpenAI cases? Not just the news plaintiff's case, but many others, including ones from The Intercept, Rickner Communications, and many others. I doubt this will temper the extremely hyperbolic rhetoric about AI destroying journalism, yada yada, but at least it's yet another point we can use to counter it. Remember, what the Neo-Luddites want is nothing less than the destruction of your freedom of speech. Don't give them an inch.
I'm Brother Ezekiel, and I know how naughty thou hast been. So naughty, thou needst a VPN. Hide thy iniquity from prying eyes, and make sure the liturgical authorities remain ignorant. Take thy browser to vpn.bogosity.tv to get BoxPN. At $6.36 a month, a price only the most penurious would balk at, thou shalt have unlimited high-speed connections to servers all over the globe. And they don't log connections. Thy privacy is assured. That should please you sinners. Just remember, the Lord sees all. When traveling, make it look like thou art still home. At home, ensure the elders at your ISP don't take out their judgment with traffic shaping and DMCA notices. Up to 5 devices can connect at once, almost one for every deadly sin. Keep thy sins private. Go to vpn.bogosity.tv.
More good news from the Supreme Court. They struck down Hawaii's restrictions on public carrying of firearms by concealed permit holders, as well as the laws in Hawaii and other states known as vampire carry, declaring that the default right is guns are banned, not allowed. Property owners have to explicitly grant each individual person permission to bring a firearm onto their premises. That stands centuries of common law on its head, which recognizes the alternative. Property owners can restrict the carrying of firearms, but if they don't explicitly say so, government cannot make that decision for them. This law also makes the decision for indifferent property owners who may be okay with people bringing weapons on their property, but don't feel like explicitly saying so. Justice Alito, delivering the 6-3 opinion, wrote, "This law departs sharply from the standard common law rule on access to private property held open to the public. Under that rule, everyone, including those lawfully carrying firearms, may enter unless expressly prohibited from doing so. By contrast, under the new Hawaii law, no one carrying a firearm may enter without the property owner's express authorization. The effect of this new rule is to impose severe restrictions on the daily activities of residents who have satisfied the state's rigorous requirements for the issuance of a carry permit. When these permit holders leave home in the morning, not only must they take care to avoid all the territory where the possession of a gun is prohibited outright, but they may also be barred from entering many places that people routinely visit in the course of their daily routines, such as gas stations, convenience stores, restaurants, coffee shops, drug stores, grocery stores, big box stores, home improvement stores, barber shops or hair salons, dry cleaners, and laundromats. This regime hobbles what the Second Amendment protects, the right of Americans to carry arms for self-defense as they go about their daily lives. We hold that the law is unconstitutional." Hawaii's new default rule is part of a tight web of laws that severely restricts the carrying of firearms for self-defense. To start, carrying a handgun for self-defense requires a special license, and obtaining that license is a rigorous process. But even for those who fulfill these stringent requirements, Hawaii imposes 2 additional restrictions on carrying firearms. The first bans the possession of a firearm in significant categories of places: any state-owned building or adjacent grounds and parking areas, any public or private hospital or other place at which medical or health services are customarily provided, any restaurant serving alcohol, any stadium, movie theater, or concert hall, any public library property, any public or private college or university, any public school, charter school, or private school, any beach, playground, or park, any bank or financial institution, any amusement park, aquarium, carnival, circus, fair, museum, water park, or zoo, and any public gathering, public assembly, or special event conducted on property open to the public. Some of these places are owned by the state, but many of the categories include privately owned property. So even if the owner of such a place wanted to admit individuals who were carrying a gun for self-defense, the owner could not do so. The second restriction, the one at issue in this case, generally prohibits licensed individuals from carrying a firearm, even if unloaded or inoperable, on private property of another. Certain categories of individuals, such as police officers, are exempt. Because of course they are. Hawaii, in trying to conform to the Bruin test, pointed to previous laws that did similar things, but fortunately, Alito was there to point out the racist nature of it. It was adopted by the Louisiana legislature between the end of the Civil War and the beginning of Reconstruction. When the war ended, the legislatures in defeated Confederate states quickly enacted so-called black codes that aimed to perpetuate the subjugation of blacks. The statute Hawaii cites was part of Louisiana's Black Code, and it provided a tool for disarming blacks and thus leaving them defenseless against attacks. As we laid out in McDonald, the right to keep and bear arms was crucially important for vulnerable blacks during this period, and this was well understood by the Republicans in Congress who were responsible for drafting, approving, and securing the ratification of the 14th Amendment. The Republican Party platforms of 1856 and 1860 called for protection of the right to keep and bear arms for self-defense. Unless we put history entirely out of our minds, Hawaii's claim that this tainted artifact illuminates the original understanding of the right to keep and bear arms cannot be taken seriously. He concluded, "The Hawaii law at issue here violates the constitutional right to keep and bear arms. Therefore, the judgment of the Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit is reversed, and the case is remanded for further proceedings consistent with this opinion." The 3 liberal justices dissented, of course. We saw in oral arguments that they were stupid enough not to get it, and they're stupid enough not to get it here. Kagan said in her dissent, quote, "I would uphold the challenged Hawaii law because, As Justice Jackson shows in Part 3 of her opinion, it is a modern-day analog of colonial and founding area laws that similarly prohibited firearms onto private property without the owner's affirmative consent. Yeah, the Black Codes. And yes, that means that in her dissent, Jackson actually defended the Black Codes. Listen to how stupid this woman is. Quote, "Worse, the majority's new methodology is a one-way ratchet. It inevitably works only to the benefit of armed carry by removing any real burden of proof on gun owners at step 1. But they shouldn't have any burden of proof. It's their right. The burden of proof is on the people who want to go against the right." Quote, "The majority simply equates the ability to carry a gun with the right to carry anywhere and everywhere. Well, if you don't have the ability, how is it a right?" Quote, "The analogs cited by Hawaii clearly establish that legislatures historically required affirmative consent for carrying a firearm onto private property, the same how as Section 134-9.5, and they did so to protect property owners' interests in response to concerns related to unauthorized armed entry, the same why as Section 134-9.5. Yes, their interest in keeping people of your skin tone unarmed, subjugated, and helpless. Here's what she has to say about it. No joke. Quote, "Given the court's commitment to elevating the history and tradition of firearm use and regulation when deciding Second Amendment challenges, the idea that courts must categorically exclude historical laws that restricted black people from possessing firearms, not unlike the categorical exclusion of the people who were historically bound by those laws, warrants further scrutiny." And after 4 pages of scrutiny, quote, "Either history does matter, and if so, all potentially relevant historical experiences must be thoroughly examined to determine whether they reflect our nation's history and tradition of firearm regulation, or it does not, and the court should just admit that the test it has created is boundless, allowing it to accept or excise any historical analog it chooses for any reason it prefers." Yes, she truly, seriously is too stupid to see the difference. But it's often been remarked how democracy makes its victims complicit in their own oppression. I want to tell you about the eyeglasses I've been wearing for years. As people can see on my videos, I have a very strong prescription, which makes glasses more expensive, especially when I need computer glasses, reading glasses, prescription sunglasses, and most expensively, progressive lenses for general everyday wear. To save money while still getting quality glasses, I get them from Firmoo. In fact, I just got a pair of progressives with high-index aspherical lenses and a nice pair of frames my wife loves for just over $100. It would have been $500 to get them through my eye doctor. Not only do they look good, the glasses are durable. I've worn many pairs for several years without problems. All orders come with a 30-day return policy, a 3-month warranty, and one-on-one customer service. Go to Firmoo, that's FIRMOO.Bogosity.tv anytime you need quality glasses at a low price. Once again, that's Firmoo.Bogosity.tv. And now it's time to totalitarianize this week's biggest Bogon emitter. And it's another one for the news media, and once again, news outlets en masse see fit to create more anti-Elon and anti-Tesla panic over an accident where a grandmother lost her life. This'll be a long one, so buckle up. Sorry, couldn't stop myself. Let's start with a so-called reporting of the New York Times. Headline: Tesla driver using autopilot crashes into home, killing a woman, officials say. Michael Butler was driving his Tesla at 75 miles per hour through neighborhood streets when he left the road and crashed into the home of Martha Avila, killing her. Butler told police he'd been using Tesla's autopilot. So first of all, it wasn't officials say. The guy said it. The officials were just reporting what he claimed. Officials only say it because the driver said it, but that's not the impression they leave you with. They know what they're doing. So did Electrek when they posted to X, NHTSA is investigating a fatal crash in Katy, Texas, where a Model 3 on autopilot left the road, tore through a brick home, and killed a 76-year-old woman inside. For those of you who aren't aware, when autopilot isn't on a highway, it limits itself to 5 miles per hour above the speed limit. Any Tesla owner, including your humble host, will tell you that in any such situation, it happens because the driver has his foot to the floor. Pressing the accelerator overrides FSD and autopilot. Anything the driver does overrides the computer. The driver is in control at all times. And by the way, if you do hold down the pedal and drive at an unsafe speed or leave the road, the screen flashes red and a loud alarm blazes into your ears. ABC's World News Tonight Ext. In Texas, a Tesla vehicle allegedly on autopilot crashed into a home near Houston, killing a 76-year-old woman. Remember in the past where this podcast has talked about things like passive voice or using the car itself as the subject to avoid giving accountability to police? Same thing here. Tell me something. How come they don't report accidents where the driver said he had cruise control on? Or had the radio set to 95.7? Or more seriously, any of the other ADAS systems in vehicles today? You never hear, car with traction control turned on crashes into house at 90 miles per hour. Or, radio tuned to 95.7 crashes into house at 90 miles per hour, killing a mother of 4. Why is it just autopilot and FSD that get this elevation into the headlines? Meanwhile, Waymos have been driving into construction zones at highway speeds and the media is silent. And for another example, no safe words posted to X. Hey, New York Times, breaking story. The driver of this Ford claims they were using Blue Cruise the entire time, and they are not responsible for any of the damage to the front lawn of this house. The attached video shows a doorbell cam of a Ford being driven into a lawn and ruining the grass. Quote, the driver said it, so that automatically means it's an established fact that can be printed as a headline. We will stand by for your story. After viewing the doorbell video of the Tesla accident, saw your merit, Ext. Here is real-time video of the Tesla crashing into the house in Texas a couple nights ago. The car was absolutely flying. Again, Tesla vehicle logs will show whether any system was turned on or not, but neither autopilot nor FSD operates at speeds like this in residential areas. NBC News tweeted, one person is dead after a Tesla on autopilot crashed through her Texas home, authorities say. And then there was the News Nation report, which went,
a terrifying Tesla crash under investigation tonight. Incredible. The driver told investigators he had the vehicle on autopilot mode when things just went wrong. He says the car simply slammed into this house.
While crashes involving advanced driver assistance systems are relatively low compared to the millions of crashes that happen each year, federal data shows that there have been nearly 3,900 reported crashes involving the technology since 2021, and Tesla vehicles account for a majority of them. Law professor Bryant Walker-Smith, who testified in front of a U.S. Senate committee in February about self-driving cars, says these systems have been confused in the past by speed limit signs or nearby freeways.
It could fall into the broader category of what's called sudden unintended acceleration.
Yeah, I'll take things that don't bloody happen for 600, Alex. They actually brought up the Florida case where a jury somehow found Tesla responsible for a crash where a driver had his foot on the accelerator, dropped his phone, and fished around to pick it up when he left the road and crashed into a parked car. After Business Insider posted a story that said, quote, a Tesla driver using auto assistance crashed into a Texas home, killing a woman, Elon Musk replied, yes, this makes no sense. FSD drives slowly through neighborhood streets, and this was a high-speed crash. And Ashok Elaswamy replied with the data. Yep, in this case, the driver manually overrode self-driving by pressing the accelerator all the way to 100% of the accel pedal in this residential area. They reached a speed of 73 miles per hour during the crash and had the accelerator pressed even after the crash. Merritt replied, I look forward to the media issuing corrections, woozy-faced emoji. Ashok later exed, This blatantly irresponsible reporting does more harm to people than they realize. Using Tesla self-driving is far safer than manual driving, and this was measured over 10 billion miles. Planting such FUD in the minds of general public who might not know all the facts might prevent them from using this technology that makes them safer. The thing is, even after we got verification from Tesla that the driver had his foot to the floor, the news media wouldn't stop. Reuters released, a U.S. agency said on Monday it was investigating the June 19 crash of a Tesla Model 3 that was reportedly using an advanced driver system when it struck a home in Katy, Texas, killing a 76-year-old woman. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration has opened nearly 50 special crash investigations since 2016 into incidents involving Teslas in which advanced driver assistance systems such as autopilot were suspected of being used, with about 24 deaths reported. And Electrek doubled down. Tesla admits FSD was on in fatal Texas crash, blames driver for overriding it. Yes, overriding was in scare quotes. They actually wrote, "People don't floor the accelerator into a brick house for no reason. The driver overrode the system isn't an exoneration. It's a description of the failure mode that Level 2 systems create. Both autopilot and FSD supervised require an attentive driver who can take over instantly, but they're designed to do the driving, which conditions people to disengage exactly when the rare emergency takeover is hardest to execute." He had his foot to the floor for many seconds before leaving the road and crashing into the house. He'd sped up to 73 miles per hour. This isn't complacency or confusion. This is the driver doing something completely inexcusable. And they kept it up in headline after headline after headline. On the rare occasion when they acknowledged the pedal data, they still said it was Tesla's fault for not applying the brakes or otherwise preventing the crash. But what's the real option here? Does Tesla disable the accelerator while FSD and autopilot are engaged? Then how do you intervene if you need to? No. All of this is more anti-Elon propaganda and is definitely worthy of the investigation about who is doing what in the back channels. This is organized. Remember our earlier story where we talked about how more people trust social media than the news media? This is why. So all of that makes the news media this week's biggest Bogon emitter. And now let's hyper-conglomeratizationalize this week's Idiot Extraordinaire! And it's yet another one for Wikipedia. For quite some time, as we've covered on previous editions of this podcast, Wikipedia has come under fire for editorial malfeasance, making decisions based not on neutral point of view or fact-checking, but on extremist political views. When co-founder Larry Sanger campaigned to make the editorial system more balanced, the real powers that be at Wikipedia banned him. Permanently. A month ago, Sanger launched Wiki Project Intellectual Diversity, designed to help Wikipedia's, quote, original firm commitment to intellectual diversity. That meant both neutrality and transparency. But apparently, Wikipedia isn't about that anymore. Sanger, who created the site with Jamie Wales in 2001, is the one who came up with the name Wikipedia and created the site's foundational set of rules and guidelines. He is now permanently blocked from editing the site, the most drastic action that can be taken against a Wikipedia editor. Sanger said, quote, I am flabbergasted. They are constantly trying to gauge what other people think, and this is the way ultimately those people are able to influence each other. Even a lot of the hard and fast policies are regarded as just guidelines if everybody is on board. The current set of Uber editors, which Sanger called, quote, a mob or a blob, has been extremely biased against certain underrepresented viewpoints, such as Hindus. Many articles have come under fire from independent observers as having a far-left bias or being anti-conservative or even anti-centrist. The editors didn't give any reason for Sanger's ban. Despite the fact that well over 250,000 people edit the site every 30 days, Sanger says the problem lies with just 62 accounts, which he calls the Power 62, and likened to a faceless mob. 85% of the Power 62 hide behind their screen names and are completely anonymous. Sanger said, quote, "There is no due process. People are being blocked, in other words disciplined, and yet there is no respect for certain expectations that any other serious disciplinary procedure would be held to. The editors had deliberately blocked every avenue for appeal. In particular, one anonymous editor named Tarnished Path, one of the most combative editors on the platform, was behind the block. Tarnished Path has also been behind other controversial maneuvers, such as freezing the lead of the site's article on Zionism, locking in a sentence that critics say equates the movement for Jewish self-determination with ethnic cleansing. Tarnished Path has also been extremely active regarding gender issues, including having Harry Potter author J.K. Rowling labeled as anti-trans and a TERF, declaring those to be neutral point of view because, quote, "We go by what reliable sources say." And remember what we revealed earlier about the origins of COVID-19? Tarnished Path said about editors who added the lab leak theory, quote, "They might have a political smear that they wish to push, but anyone who knows what terms properly mean can't say the lab leak conspiracy is a scientific theory with any sort of integrity." Wikipedia's own administrators sanctioned Tarnished Path and blocked the editor from the entire Israel-Palestine subject area because of the user's extremist anti-Semitism. Some editors complained about Sanger's ban as being inappropriate or hasty, but their views went ignored. Other editors had claimed that Sanger's ban was because of canvassing, something he wasn't even formally accused of. Sanger gave the timeline of his experience on X. Thursday, finally decide that Wiki Project Intellectual Diversity is ready to submit for approval. Submit it. Friday a.m., be surprised at all the pushback. Where was this the last 2 months? A little later, casually post, again, an update about WPID. We've applied, but lots of people have come out against and for. No invitation to participate. I know that's verboten. Friday afternoon, massive harumphing that I mentioned the application publicly. Friday eve, cases started at ANI, the administrator zoo, over my canvassing and then a dozen other things. Saturday and Sunday, I am quietly crucified by a bunch of dweebs who in any proper community would be considered insufferable trolls. Monday morning early, I am blocked by an eager admin who has decided there is a community consensus to block me. Monday mid-morning, Jimbo Wales engages repeatedly on his user talk page to support me. Sounds very reasonable as he strives to do in such situations. Same time, I take off for NYC. Monday late morning, I am unblocked by an admin who sternly admonishes the previous admin that 72 hours must pass before I am blocked. Monday early eve, I am perma-blocked from the site I founded for silly reasons by the mob. 2 hours later, I receive a Sinai Award in Lower Manhattan for starting and then trying to correct Wikipedia. 10 minutes after that, Boy George receives his Sinai Award as well. I am not making this up. Sanger also said, quote, "It's so interesting that Jimmy has come out and defended me, but I have a feeling he's going to be very unsuccessful and that I am going to be permanently banned. I don't think it's ultimately going to make any difference." In fact, I'll just let Sanger have the last word. Wikipedia has lost so many valuable contributors. It has blocked and pissed off so many people over the years and failed to support experts. It could have been so much better if they had not alienated so many. And most Wikipedia admins are unmoved by this obvious fact. And now they must answer the question, why was your co-founder blocked again? Because he was trying to recruit a wide variety of people from various cultures for Wiki Project Intellectual Diversity? Strangely, banning the co-founder who was pushing for meaningful reform might prove to be the very thing that ultimately allows true reformation of the project of neutrally documenting the world's knowledge. So all of that makes Wikipedia this week's Idiot Extraordinaire. Well, that wraps up this, and besides, I'm 26 and I'm not married, edition of the Bogosity podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please go to donate.bogosity.tv for several ways to support, and discord.bogosity.tv to join the discussion. Subscribe to the Discord, Patreon, or Subscribestar, and you can listen early and ad-free. Thank you for listening. Until next time, here's a quote from Clarence Darrow. Chase after the truth like all hell and you'll free yourself, even though you never touch its coattails. The Bogosity podcast is licensed under Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives 4.0 International License.